Of women didn't recognise bloating, abdominal pain and feeling full as warning signs. It also found GPs were too quick to dismiss symptoms. Well, Deputy Chief Executive of the charity, Alex Holden, is calling on the government for more education.
The symptoms are fairly clear. Even in early stages of ovarian cancer, the vast majority of people will experience those symptoms as well. So it would be just to consider it early. So we ask GPs to be thinking about it earlier, and also women to be raising it earlier as well. If women were going to GPs and saying, actually, have you thought about ovarian cancer, that would also help.
You're now up to date here on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now, let's head to Liam for On the Money.
And coming up on the money today on GB News TV and radio, the face-off between Russia and Ukraine is escalating, and Western leaders are dialing up the rhetoric on sanctions. But what might trade restrictions on a country that exports huge amounts of food and fuel mean for inflation and the cost of living crisis here in the UK? We host a grown-up discussion with people who really know their stuff. GB News is in Yorkshire, where the cost of living squeeze is getting tighter. Plus, for today's In-Depth Money Talks interview.
Fossil fuel prices are skyrocketing. People are scrambling for natural gas and coal. What does that mean? That means the promise that these could be easily replaced by the solar and wind was a false promise.
Alex Epstein, energy analyst and author of the best-selling book, The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels, who joins us from California. He challenges many popular ideas about energy and the environment and champions the case for fossil fuels like oil and gas. It'll be a fascinating chat. You won't want to miss it. That's later in the show. Above all, On the Money's about helping you tackle the rising cost of living. I want to hear your experiences and concerns. Email me at beatthesqueeze@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've got almost 500,000 subscribers. So tell me about your efforts to make ends meet, making GB News viewers and listeners a central part of this show. Stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're on the money. Now, this Russia-Ukraine conflict has indeed escalated, and that has economic as well as military and political implications. Russia's one of the world's biggest oil exporters and supplies Western Europe, of course, with 40% of our natural gas. This vast country also exports huge amounts of basic foodstuffs. So if, as and when Western leaders do impose heavy trading sanctions on Russia, as well they might as the military action gets serious, they'll need to consider the potentially big impact on the Western world's cost of living. Now, as tensions rise between Russia and Ukraine, the oil price has risen. Back in March 2020, the Brent crude oil price was relatively low at $32 a barrel. A year later, that had more than doubled to $65. One reason, broader inflation started to rise. This morning, oil's at almost $100 a barrel, up a third since early January, as those Russia-Ukraine tensions have escalated. So oil's at an 8-year high and up sharply today, and that will push up other prices too, from petrol and diesel to the cost of many manufactured goods. Russia's also the world's biggest wheat exporter. If there are sanctions on that, food prices in the West could go up as well. And Moscow's just slapped a ban on exports of something called ammonium nitrate, used to make fertiliser. That's why so many farmers here in the UK and elsewhere are keeping a close eye on its military crisis, because less Russian ammonium nitrate means more expensive fertiliser, which again could raise food prices. Yes, of course, this is a big moment for the UK, diplomatically and in terms of our military. But it's a big moment too when it comes to our ongoing cost of living crisis. Here at On the Money, we're focused on living standards, helping you to beat the squeeze. Millions of UK families are already finding it harder to make ends meet. And efforts to contain Russia, however justified, could raise our cost of living even more. So as Western politicians crank up the sanctions rhetoric, here's today's On the Money question. Rising East-West tensions. Will food and energy prices go up? Joining me on my expert panel today, we have Malcolm Grinston, Senior Research Fellow at the Centre for Energy Policy and Technology at Imperial College. Great to see you, Malcolm. Also, Howard Cox, an on-the-money regular, founder of Fair Fuel UK. An important day for you, Malcolm, talking about those petrol and diesel prices, and an on-the-money regular. She's back. It's Victoria Scholar, Head of Investments at Interactive Investment. Great to see you in the studio, Victoria. Victoria, let's start with you. I touched there on rising oil prices. We've seen financial markets pretty much across the globe take a hit. This is the biggest escalation of East-West tensions since the Cold War.
Yeah, so we've seen UK natural gas prices today rise by around 10%.
Wow.
Oil price inching closer to $100 a barrel. That's up by about 40% since the lows in December. So clearly we're seeing the geopolitical implications for the dynamics between supply and demand in the energy markets. They were already very tight, that's the thing. We had supercharged demand after COVID, coupled by limited supply. And now this is another pressure that's creating uncertainty about the outlooks for supplies in the energy complex and driving prices higher.
It's interesting, isn't it, Howard? You know, we can show pictures from the Russo-Ukrainian border. It seems a very distant conflict to lots of our viewers and listeners, perhaps right on the other side of Europe. But we're already seeing the implications, even today, of this escalating tensions in terms of the pound in our pocket as we go to fill up our cars and vans.
Absolutely right, Liam. Thank you for having me on your show. This is a disastrous day, what's happening at the moment, but it's actually manna for heaven for the speculators further up the fuel supply chain, because they are ripping off motorists. No one knows how this is happening. We're getting most of our oil, for example, for petrol and diesel from the Middle East. Why is Russia having this impact to incredible increases? We hear that the wholesale price of diesel and petrol is going up 3 to 4p today. And will that be passed on? Of course it will, but it'll be passed on in droves, something like 3 times that amount. And I see pump prices exceeding £1.60 very soon.
Malcolm, you're there in your ivory tower, Imperial College London. You're a world authority on global energy markets and energy strategy. Of course, we need to focus on what's happening militarily, diplomatically. We need to think about the safety of British troops and so on as this conflict escalates. But there are big economic implications too, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, let's keep this in perspective. Compared to what happened in the 70s, the oil price shock then, this is relatively small beer at the moment. We had an oil price then of $150 a barrel in money of the day.
On the Yom Kippur War and Arab-Israeli tensions.
And the OPEC getting its act together through the 80s. And what happened then was the world responded. It built a lot of nuclear power as a hedge to that. It built a lot of coal capacity. And markets do respond over time towards this. So these are not forever high prices. As long as we don't interfere with the market's ability to make investments out of the money it's making through, say, windfall taxes or whatever that remove the incentive to invest, then I think the market will respond to this. But what can't happen overnight. These are very long-term investments. In fact, it's the history of energy that these are investments with decades-long horizons, which are being taken on the basis of what happened last week and maybe the week before.
And would you say, Malcolm, ordinarily it's just nerdy people like you and me that talk about the proportion of gas that comes from Russia and oil price margins and all the rest of it. But now this is absolutely mainstream news, centre stage, given the cost of living crisis. Do you think this may provoke a kind of rethink in the British government in terms of the amount of gas storage we need? We've got hardly any in terms of our nuclear capability. We need more if we're going to insulate ourselves from global conflicts and tensions in terms of the supply of fossil fuels to our shores.
In a sense, that's what crises like this are for, is to refocus on those long-term issues. Already we have the government talking very positively about nuclear power, which is a very good thing. We are, you're quite right about storage. We've got about a week's worth of storage. Most of our competitors have about 3 months.
Unbelievable. Like the Germans, the Dutch, the Spanish.
Yeah, and if I wanted to play devil's advocate on that, while we had huge North Sea reserves, we didn't need storage.
That's right.
Because the reserves were their own storage. We could just increase output from North Sea. Of course, we had a glorious decade when we were exporting gas. We now are out of it. We use the same energy every day of the week. 3 days we'd be making our own. 3 days it will be coming in through pipelines. 1 day it will be coming in through tankers. Now, at the moment, it's only 5% Russian gas. Most of it's coming from Norway and from other sources. But inevitably, the effect on Europe of huge increases in Russian gas will end up affecting us.
Indeed. Victoria, turning to you, we can see already the British government making noises about, oh, we didn't want more oil and gas exploration in the North Sea, now perhaps we do. Oh, we didn't want fracking, there was a moratorium on that. Oh, now maybe we will start trying to exploit those shale gas reserves up there in the northwest of England and elsewhere. Financial markets must really have their eyes on these changes or potential changes in government policy given this crisis.
Yeah, and I think it's all about the long-term transition towards green energy, and governments have been unwilling to lock into longer-term contracts within fossil fuels, and that's where we've fallen short. And actually, we need to think a lot more about bridging fuels and the fact that we're not quite there in terms of the green economy and the green infrastructure, and we still probably need fossil fuels, at least to some extent, for some time. We've talked before on the show about hydrogen. It's about being a bit more inventive in terms of where we do get our energy from. Luckily, in the UK, we're not as dependent on Russian energy compared to, say, Germany and some of Western Europe that's got about 40% dependence. We're much lower than that. But at the same time, this is clearly affecting us, and it's impacting inflation and the cost of living crisis, because this is a major contributor to rising price levels. And that is likely to filter through in terms of higher monetary policy, tighter financial conditions.
Higher interest rates and so on.
Higher interest rates, exactly.
Howard, turning back to you, bringing it down to the sharp end, the motorist, the householder with our fuel and energy bills. Do you think the government's going to have to do more? We know there's this cost of living triple whammy coming in April. We talk about it all the time on GB News. We've got high national insurance contributions. We've got high utility bills as that off-gem energy regulator price cap kicks in. It's much higher. We've got higher inflation in general, maybe then 7 or even 8%. Do you think the government is going to have to act to try and rein in the petrol retailers, particularly the motorway service station retailers that are charging 10% more than everyone else, to perhaps give households more help with their fuel bills this April?
Well, Liam, I couldn't put it any better, what you just said and what Victoria said about the impact on inflation on our cost of living. The important thing is, and it saddens me, and I respect what you're saying, but one of the things is we're talking about markets. People out there, the lady that's going to visit her mother-in-law in hospital, etc., in her Peugeot 105, it doesn't know how much she's going to be paying at the pumps next week. What we do need is the government. It's very simple, and I'm working with backbench MPs, people like Robert Halfon and Craig McKinley. We're calling on a body called Pump Watch for petrol and diesel, whereby you mentioned Ofgem, we've got Ofcom. Why haven't we got for 37 million UK drivers some sort of consumer protection? We don't want a price cap. We want all retailers in the fuel supply chain to make a healthy profit. But please, can we have transparency at the pump? So when oil goes up or comes down or the exchange rate changes, we understand what we'll be paying a few days later.
And those big profits for the major global oil companies operating in the UK, Labour's idea of a windfall tax is likely to get a bit more traction in the coming weeks and months, I'd say. But we're going to carry on this discussion after the break. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. My expert panel is here, so don't go away. Stay with us. You're on the money.
Hello again. Bright and breezy sums up the afternoon for most of us. Sunny spells. There are a few showers around. It's breezy, but of course nothing like as windy as recent days. We've actually got a fairly active cold front slipping south. Active means it's got some pretty heavy rain on it. Earlier today brought a very wet start over parts of southern Scotland, northern England and Wales. But it is pushing southwards, and as it is drifting southwards, it's fizzling out. Still bringing some rain for a time across East Anglia and the southeast through the early afternoon, but it is scooting away fairly rapidly. Sunshine follows and a few showers for North Wales, northwest England, and particularly western Scotland, where they're falling as snow over the hills. A scattering of showers coming in on a brisk breeze for Northern Ireland. It is breezy, but it's pretty mild across the south, 11, 12 degrees. Further north, closer to average in single figures. We'll keep the showers coming in across Scotland this evening. Still some snow over the hills. Mostly rain at lower levels. The showers elsewhere easing off, so much of England and Wales having a dry night and a clear night and a bit of a cold one as well. Enough breeze to stop towns and cities dropping to freezing, but certainly rural areas, some pockets of frost possible. We start off with more wet weather then across Scotland, and this weather front is going to be slower to head southwards, so quite a wet day over the Highlands, the rain turning increasingly to snow, but also pushing into the central belt and Northern Ireland, so a soggy afternoon here. For England and Wales, most places dry, just a few showers drifting into South Wales, the Midlands and South West England. Sunny spells across the east, but it's going to get windy, particularly to the east of the Pennines, North East England up to eastern Scotland. Very gusty conditions through Wednesday afternoon, and increasingly the winds picking up and bringing more snow showers through Wednesday night across western Scotland and Northern Ireland. So we're quite concerned about this area here. That cold front pushing south, introducing the cold air everywhere, but some snow and strong winds likely in the northwest as we go into Thursday. That's all your weather from me for now. Goodbye.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 1:23. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan, on DAB plus digital radio and, of course, GB News television. Now, in the last hour, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced sanctions against 5 Russian banks and 3 what are called very high net worth individuals. That's ultra-rich people under his first barrage, in quotes, of measures over the Russian-Ukrainian incursion. But what might trade restrictions on a country that exports huge amounts of fuel and food mean for inflation, the broader cost of living crisis here in the UK? I'm still with my expert panel. Malcolm Grimston, you are Senior Research Fellow at Imperial College London. What's your general thought here? I'm talking about trade sanctions on Russia, which obviously is a fuel superpower, a food superpower as well. As and when sanctions come in, going above and beyond the quite light sanctions that Boris Johnson has just announced on individuals and banks, do you think we could see a further spike in fuel and food prices?
I think that's almost inevitable, if only because of the uncertainties, quite apart from the actual effect it might have on flow. And Russia has done this over the last couple of decades. From time to time, it uses its enormous muscle just to remind Europe about getting too keen about sanctions. I don't see how we can not take action on a country that invades another European country in this way. But I think we need to. And I think the real focus at the moment should be not on trying to choke back the price rises, but I think it should be on trying to protect those who are least able to pay themselves. Frankly, for me, high energy prices mean I might not drive the car as much unnecessarily, and I might get the home insulated rather better, which for the long term of the economy are both rather good things. High energy prices do have positive effects on how seriously we treat using energy properly. But of course, for the very many people who were having trouble paying their power bills before this crisis, we really do need to make sure that the welfare system is kicked into proper gear to look after those people. So my view is kind of don't panic at the moment. These issues are not there forever. the market will right itself. But in the meantime, we must make sure that there aren't serious casualties among those who can't look after themselves.
Now, Victoria, when the last inflation number came out for January, I remember you and I had a discussion. It was 5.5%. That's the headline, Consumer Price Index inflation. But of course, for much of the population, they spend heavily on fuel, they spend heavily on food, transport, heating. The idea that living standards the cost of living has only gone up by 5.5% over the last year is a sick joke. It's gone up by much more.
Yeah, I think when you look at the official figure of 5.5%, it isn't necessarily reflective of people's reality. You know, if you look at, say, a value pack of pasta, it might have gone up from 20p to 40p, and that's 100% inflation. Or if you think about the energy price cap, that's going up by 54%. And these are essential goods. They're not luxuries. They're not things that we can afford to do away with.
And lower income households spend disproportionately. They spend more heavily on those essential goods, don't they?
Yeah, so unfortunately, inflation does hit the lower income families a lot harder. So that is why we need some kind of government intervention to help. There have been measures suggested, such as Rishi Sunak saying that he's going to pay some money to families to help with the energy price cap. Also in Wales, they're saying they're going to give £150 to individuals, but that's also inflationary itself. So it's a difficult one, and it can end up in a situation called a wage price spiral, where prices go up, then workers bid for higher wages, that then turns into higher prices, and it goes up and up and up. So that's a dangerous situation, and the real risk is that inflation gets out of control. Now, some of the price pressures come from the global supply chain, and that's after COVID, and we're looking for that to ease back at some point towards the end of the year. So some of the inflationary pressures will naturally relax.
But if oil stays above $100 a barrel,
the energy story
crikey.
is difficult.
Victoria's queued up perfectly, Howard, a point I wanted to make to you. She says, I agree, 5.5% inflation, that's nonsense. It's much higher than that. You know, you focus on petrol prices. I looked at the ONS website. In January 2021, the price of a litre of petrol averaged at £1.16. In January 2022, it averaged £1.49. When I was at school, that was a 25% rise. and there's more to come. Do you think the government is going to have to act more in April to head off this huge cost of living increase?
Absolutely. They've got to do something about it. They've got to intervene. One of the things is in 2014, when oil was $125 a barrel, we had petrol prices 20 pence less than now. It just doesn't stack up. And I keep going back that we're being... The fuel supply chain is unchecked. No one's monitoring it. No one's looking at it properly. They're just allowing this perfect storm of the geopolitical events, all the things that are going over there, all the speculation. And I'm afraid the hedge funders are all circulating with a feeding frenzy to put up prices. It's absolutely insane.
Malcolm, as everybody's focused on Ukraine, understandably, and, you know, end of COVID restrictions and Her Majesty the Queen and so on, there's a lot of news around. Here's a little noticed story that I know will interest you. Unite, the union, one of Britain's biggest unions, they got lots of workers at Britain's largest oil refinery at Fawley in Southampton. They're balloting for strike action because they've been offered a lot less money than inflation. They've been offered a 2.5% wage rise. As Victoria Scholar just said, more wage claims will be coming through. What happens if there is strike action at Fawley, given the importance of that oil refinery? OK, very few people have heard of it, but they'll hear about it soon, won't they, if those workers go on strike?
Yeah, it's down near Southampton, for those who are interested in these things. We may just remember around the year 2000, 2001, there were blockades of the refineries.
Indeed.
And the country ground to a halt within 3 or 4 days, as indeed we did not so very many months ago when there was the panic buying around petrol. So this can have very, very quick, very, very serious effects on things. I hope that common sense will, well, because on the other hand, why shouldn't oil workers have a reasonable return when prices are going up and they're vital workers? But that, of course, goes for an awful lot of other areas of the economy that maybe don't have that muscle just at this moment. So that's the next stage of the issue, is what happens to wage price inflation? How does that feed into overall inflation? And then things start getting even more complicated.
Well, at least 3 members of this panel will remember the 1970s, not you, Victoria. So we've missed out on the winter of discontent, but there could well be a spring uprising. We shall see, with industrial action amidst a cost of living squeeze. Fabulous discussion. Malcolm Grimston, Imperial College London. Howard Cox, of course, from the Fair Fuel campaign, and Victoria Scholar from Interactive Investor. Thank you so much all for joining me here in the studio. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, we'll be talking with Tory MP Scott Benton. He's a Blackpool MP up there in the Red Wall in the northwest. How are his constituents dealing with the cost of living crisis? And today's Money Talks in-depth interview is with Alex Epstein, a widely read energy analyst who offers a different take on the benefits of fossil fuels. He joins us from California. But first, it's the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon to you. It is 1:33. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister has announced sanctions against 5 Russian banks and what he's calling 3 very high net wealth individuals in response to the crisis in Ukraine. It's the first in what Boris Johnson says will be a barrage of measures against the Kremlin. As he warns, Vladimir Putin appears set on overrunning Ukraine. The Prime Minister told MPs that Russia's deployment of troops into part of the eastern parts of Ukraine, which Moscow has now recognised as independent states, amounts to a renewed invasion of the country. Scotland's First Minister will outline her plan for dealing with coronavirus later today. Nicola Sturgeon will speak to MSPs as the Scottish Government's blueprint for managing and recovering from COVID is published. Earlier this month, she'd said Scotland was through the worst of the Omicron wave and the situation was much more positive than at the start of the year. Health leaders, charities and unions have raised concerns over Boris Johnson's Living with COVID plan that you'll remember was unveiled yesterday. The Prime Minister announced free universal testing for the general public would be scrapped in April, but it's not been confirmed if that includes healthcare workers. The NHS Confederation say 94% of health leaders say staff shouldn't pay for tests. A charity's warning most women don't know the key symptoms of ovarian cancer. A poll for Target Ovarian Cancer found the majority of women didn't recognise bloating, abdominal pain and feeling full as warning signs. It also found GPs were too quick to dismiss symptoms. The fossil of a flying dinosaur known as a pterosaur has been found on the Isle of Skye. It's excited scientists. They estimate they would have lived roughly 170 million years ago, soaring over lagoons in subtropical landscapes. It's believed they caught fish and squid with criss-crossing teeth, apparently perfect for snaring slippery prey. You're up to date now on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. Shortly, we'll be back to On the Money.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back. It's 1:35. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. Now, the UK's cost of living crisis continues with food, fuel and energy on the rise. And so On the Money's committed to helping you beat the squeeze. But data from the Food Foundation showed 1 million adults in the UK went an entire day without food last month. And charities are warning this price crunch is only going to get worse. Our Yorkshire reporter Anna Riley went to Calderdale in West Yorkshire, one of England's most deprived areas, where some residents are being hit hard by the current crisis.
Rebecca Jones is a mum of two living on the breadline. She pays £10 a day on energy bills and struggles to heat and furnish her flat. Often the family are left with nothing to eat by the end of the month. Rebecca used to work 35 hours a week, but due to the benefits system, was left with pocket change at the end of the month. She believes the system needs reforming.
It's just an absolute nightmare. So the more you work, the more money they take away from your claim. So in my eyes, I don't see where the incentive is to go out and work. Like me, I was brought up in a working family. Both my parents worked, and I am a worker. I like to work. I like to go out and earn my own coin, my own money. But when you're earning your money and then it's getting taken off you, I just don't see, where the incentive is. I feel totally penalised.
Rebecca's money situation plunged her into depression, and she had to get a debt relief order to pay her way out of bills for items bought on finance, like her appliances and carpets.
I am actually having what you call CBT therapy at the moment, and it is purely down to my money situation. And so I get myself stressed and I get myself really, really worked up over the financial situation and feel like rubbish because I'm not able to provide my kids with what they need in life.
Charity Noah's Ark provide counselling and financial advice and helped Rebecca to get out of debt. The Calderdale area in which they operate is in the top 10% most deprived in England, and recently the charity has seen a real increase in the need for their services.
The last few weeks has been incessant. I've never known a period like it. Our referral rates are running currently at double what we'd expect for this time of year, and equally the number of insolvencies that we're arranging is running at double the amount we'd normally see. Similarly, our food bank activity is 100% higher than it was in November, December time. 100% of our clients are suffering from poor mental health, and it might just be that they're not answering the door, opening their post, but that's anxiety. Right through to the other end of the spectrum where people are literally suicidal and they're this close to doing something crazy. And the one thing I would say to anybody listening is never end your life because of debt, because there's a way out of it, trust me.
The DWP say changes to universal credit are making sure that work pays, with nearly 2 million working families being boosted by an average of £1,000 a year, with an upcoming 6.6% rise in the living wage. And they say universal credit provides a financial safety net while supporting claimants back into work. With bills and inflation only set to rise in April, the coming months are certainly set to be tough for many. Anna Riley, GB News, Calderdale.
And that was Anna Riley, GB News Yorkshire reporter there. Now, continuing this conversation on the cost of living crisis, which we're talking about, of course, in the context of those escalating tensions between Russia and Ukraine, I'm delighted to welcome the Tory MP for Blackpool South, Scott Benton. Scott, great to have you with us as ever here on The Money and in the studio. Victoria Scholar is still with us. She is from Interactive Investor. Scott, let's talk to you. As you know, here at GB News, on The Money in particular, we focus on the cost of living all the time, helping our viewers to understand and beat the squeeze. We just heard there from some of my panellists that petrol and diesel prices are set to go up again because of these Russian incursions on the Ukraine, the impact on global energy prices. Wholesale gas prices are going up. We can sit in television studios, can't we, and talk about the cost of living crisis. What does it mean for your constituents?
Well, it's fastly becoming the biggest single issue in my mailbag by far. I go out knocking on doors every single week, and this is a main issue people are now speaking to me about. Of course, it's not just the price of fuel at the pumps, it's the price of essential goods in the supermarket, and that's without talking about the wider energy price rises or indeed council tax and national insurance from April onwards. So my constituency is one of the poorest in England, and we are on the bricks of a cost of living crisis here. The government are putting support in. It's only a few weeks ago we saw the £9 billion package from the government, which is effectively worth £300 for every single household in the country. But I think that needs to be seen as a start of government assistance in terms of the cost of living rather than the end of the process. So myself and a number of colleagues really are knocking on every single door in Westminster to make sure the government are aware of how serious this issue is in constituencies such as mine in the Red Wall.
Well, Scott, hold on. We're just going to bring in a GB News viewer. We often have GB Newers here on the show who've emailed me at beatthesqueeze@gbnews.uk. Welcome to Barry Powell, who's joining us from the Midlands. Barry's in his early 50s, and you're concerned, Barry, aren't you, about the costs of motoring, about the costs of buying a hybrid electric vehicle, in general about the costs of making ends meet as prices go up?
To a degree I am, like every viewer is who's watching GB News. But I don't think the problem is just as straightforward as just putting money into people's pockets to cover up the issues that we really face. Because to me, we've got a dual split issue here of firstly gas and then electricity. Electricity, we've got, whichever way you want to put it, we have a growing population in the UK and we have an ageing infrastructure which doesn't seem to be able to support it. We've also got issues with gas where we're in quite a rush to go for net carbon zero as quick as possible. And because we've started to decrease our reliance on North Sea gas, we're at the beck and call of importing from Europe, which is really, it's hurting everybody's pockets. So we need to really put investment into the infrastructure, not just sort of a short sticking plaster on people's pockets. Because to me, I can pay the bills, but there are a lot of people out there who are really, really struggling.
Just before we bring in Victoria Scholar, let's go back to Scott Benton there. Scott, your government has championed the whole idea of net zero. We had the COP26 summit and all the rest of it. Boris Johnson banging the drum. I think almost all the country, they want less pollution. They want a better world for their kids and their grandkids. But is it really right, as Barry says, that a lot of ordinary households, they're paying for this net zero transition with their energy bills? 25% of your electricity bill goes to subsidies for renewable energy companies. Is that really the right thing to be doing as those energy bills are spiralling?
I think Barry makes some excellent points. Of course, I've been on your show previously, Liam, to talk about those 25% added on every single household's energy bill through the so-called green levies and VAT as well. I am a net zero skeptic. Of course, we're all in favour of reducing carbon emissions over time, but we can't balance the costs of that on working families up and down this country. The sheer fact is, for decades and decades, governments, both Conservative and Labour, have failed on their energy policies. We should have pursued nuclear far earlier. We've become reliant on foreign energy sources, and I'm afraid with the situation in Ukraine and Russia at the moment, it's clear that was a huge strategic error. So I think we have to do a number of things. We have to up our game on nuclear. We have to continue North Sea oil exploration for gas as well. And also the question on fracking potentially needs to be reopened and re-examined. We had a look at trying to take advantage of fracking opportunities on the Foul Coast near my constituency. For whatever reason, that didn't work out, and the OGA, the Oil and Gas Authority, concluded that the risks were too high, and now those wells are in the process of being capped. However, there are other locations potentially in the UK which could be safe for fracking, and I think we do have to explore those as a matter of urgency.
Victoria, in the studio, we're seeing here before us, we're hearing the political debate panning out. We've got Barry Powell, GB News viewer, very informed bloke. We've got Scott Benton, one of the most prominent young Conservative MPs, proud Red Wall representative. We are going to see some changes here in government energy policy, aren't we? And if we do, financial markets are going to react.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've already seen the huge rally in financial markets in terms of oil prices, natural gas up by about 10% today. So governments will clearly be keeping a watchful eye and thinking about the cost of living crisis. And as has been mentioned by other guests here, the impact on low-income households. So it really does feel like this is going to be a huge focus for governments. You know, we're coming out of an unprecedented public health crisis that left the economy on its knees, and that required massive amounts of stimulus, both in terms of fiscal stimulus with the furlough scheme, stamp duty holiday, other measures, and then on the monetary side, we had rock bottom interest rates. Unfortunately, the side effect of that has been a wildly inflationary environment with demand vastly outstripping supply. So that needs to come back under check. And as we were talking about earlier, you know, the CPI measure coming in at 5.5%, but doesn't
that consumer price index,
consumer price index doesn't necessarily reflect people's reality.
And I'm sure Barry Powell and Scott Penton would agree with that. The idea that living standards have only gone up 5.5% for ordinary households seems pretty strange. In reality, it seems a lot higher. Thank you to all my guests. Scott Benton there, MP for the Conservatives in Blackpool South. Barry Powell, GB News viewer, joining us from the Midlands. And, of course, in the studio, Victoria Scholar from Interactive Investor. Thanks so much for joining us. It's time now for my daily interview series, Money Talks. And my guest today is Alex Epstein. He's an energy analyst and author of the best-selling book, The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. Alex built a global reputation, providing an alternative perspective on this energy debate, championing the case for fossil fuels like coal, oil and natural gas. And he's set to release his latest book, Fossil Future, later this spring. Here he is from Laguna Beach in California. It's energy analyst Alex Epstein, my latest Money Talks. Alex, great to have you with us here on The Money. We're delighted you're beaming in from the west coast of America. Now, what a day for you to be talking to us. Major escalation in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. The price of fossil fuels is spiking. Viewers of this show here in the UK will feel the implications of those rising fossil fuel prices. And yet you're saying that we should be defending fossil fuels and using them more.
Well, yeah, and this is perfect evidence, because what has happened? Is there some inherent shortage in fossil fuels? No, there's unbelievable amounts. Have we lost the ability to harness them? No, it's purely a political thing. We've artificially restricted the supply. And why have we done this? Because of the false promise that green energy, particularly unreliable solar and wind, could rapidly replace fossil fuels. And I've been saying for 10 years, this is madness. The cost of energy determines the cost of everything. If you restrict the supply of fossil fuels, the prices will go up. If you add unreliable solar and wind, they don't replace the cost of fossil fuels, they add to it. So it's just wasteful spending. And, you know, everyone has made their bed and now we have to live in it. And it really sucks. But we need to understand that the problem is the anti-fossil fuel movement.
Alex, you make a powerful case. Would you distinguish between different types of fossil fuels? For instance, I think most people would agree that coal does a lot worse damage to the environment than, say, gas, which is a relatively clean fossil fuel. Indeed, the European Union, in its wisdom, has just reclassified gas as a clean fuel, even though it is, of course, a fossil fuel. Or do you not distinguish between those three main fossil fuels, oil, gas and coal?
Well, I do distinguish among them, but they're all really vital. And with coal, there are two things to grasp. So one is that it can be burned very cleanly with modern technology. The other is that the world is desperately short of energy. One of my favorite stats is that 3 billion people use less electricity than a typical American refrigerator. There are 6 billion people in the world who use an amount of energy that you and I would consider completely unacceptable. So the world needs vastly more energy. Fossil fuels provide 80% of that energy. They're growing. They're uniquely good for things like heavy-duty transportation, industrial process heat. So we need vastly more energy in the world. That means vastly more fossil fuels. We should also liberate cost-effective alternatives, including nuclear, which the UK and the US has virtually criminalized. So I'm for liberating all forms of energy, including coal.
What did you think when you saw a huge economic power like Germany basically decommission all its nuclear energy, make itself more reliant on gas from Russia in the aftermath of the Fukushima disaster? When the Fukushima disaster wasn't in fact a nuclear disaster, it was an earthquake and a tsunami, and no one died from nuclear fallout in Fukushima, though of course many thousands of people unfortunately died from the natural disaster itself. Do you think what Germany did stacked up?
Well, first of all, Liam, I'm just so grateful that you said what you said, because almost no one said that. They treated it as a nuclear disaster, whereas if you were in that nuclear plant, you were safer than someone outside it. So it was totally a natural disaster. It proved that nuclear is the safest form of energy ever created. It's the cleanest form of energy ever created. We need to liberate it. And back then, I was just getting started as an energy analyst, but I said, this is totally insane. This does not make a case against nuclear. You're going to become more dependent on coal, but they also are restricting coal. And, of course, they're restricting nuclear. So what happens is you become more dependent on gas, also using the unreliable solar and wind. They cycle up and down a lot, and they really need gas to back them up because gas can go up and down quickly. So you become super dependent on gas. All of Europe bans fracking. What do you expect to happen? This is all so predictable. Everyone is looking for these crazy, non-obvious explanations because they don't want to admit that their very straightforward bad policies caused all these problems.
Alex, I totally accept we need to use fossil fuel as a transition. I totally accept, for what it's worth, that this Conservative government's rush towards net zero is maybe a little bit naive. So we do need more nuclear, but I do have concerns about how we treat nuclear waste. And I also have concerns about the use of rare earths in those batteries for electric cars. Do you think the electric car revolution is the right way to go? Or should we be looking at, say, the use of hydrogen to power our internal combustion engines going forward?
I think with all these things, it's really important that you have a market where things are free to be cost effective and prove cost effective. I think EVs are great for certain uses. They're not cost effective for most people right now. They should be free to compete, and there should be an international market. But there does need to be supervision over a lot of the abuses that occur, particularly in China, that the green movement has totally turned a blind eye to because they want to get the price of solar panels, wind turbines, and batteries as low as possible. You're seeing some pushback, some knowledge that a lot of slavery is involved. And you're also going to see supply constraints. People talk about the supply of oil, but the supply of lithium is much more precarious. The supply of polysilicon for solar is very precarious. So what you really need is markets. And unfortunately, what we have is we essentially have energy dictators who think, oh, I know how the world should run, so let me dictate that. Versus my policy is energy liberation for everyone, have clear laws for health and safety. But besides that, let every form of energy be free to compete and to empower a world which is desperately low on power.
And finally and briefly, Alex, we're just squeezed for time. You're joining us from Laguna Beach, California. I keep my eye on wholesale energy prices across the world. Wholesale energy prices in the States are now much lower than Europe, and the US has become a net energy exporter. What difference has that made where you live?
Well, the thing is, we're still doing worse. You're just doing way worse. So our prices are going up, our fuel prices are going up, industrial prices are going up. So everyone is making the same mistakes. You guys have just made more of them. But in California, we're copying you. The US is trying to copy you. So let's all learn from this cautionary tale. And if anyone wants more details, go to energytalkingpoints.com and you can get details on any of these issues we're discussing.
Well, Alex Epstein, fabulous to have you with us. Thanks so much for being subject of today's Money Talks. Alex Epstein there, energy analyst and author of Fossil Future, which is out later this spring. Just before we finish the show, some of your views. Elizabeth says, I think Boris Johnson's more interested in foreign affairs than in the big problems building up in this country. Johnson needs to pay attention to the energy crisis in the UK. The cost of living is going to explode, and Johnson is not paying attention. Paddy says the fuel companies are profiteering, and all-in tax on our home energy is ridiculous. 25% green tax at a time like this. Disgusting. Keep those emails coming. gbviews@gbnews.uk or beat the squeeze at gbnews.uk. That's all we've got time for today. Thanks for joining me. We'll be back same time, same place tomorrow. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On the Money.
Hello again. Bright and breezy sums up the afternoon for most of us. Sunny spells. There are a few showers around. It's breezy, but of course nothing like as windy as recent days. We've actually got a fairly active cold front slipping south. Active means it's got some pretty heavy rain on it. Earlier today brought a very wet start over parts of southern Scotland, northern England and Wales, but it is pushing southwards, and as it is drifting southwards, it's fizzling out. Still bringing some rain for a time across East Anglia and the southeast through the early afternoon, but it is scooting away fairly rapidly. Sunshine follows and a few showers for North Wales, northwest England, and particularly western Scotland, where they're falling as snow over the hills. A scattering of showers coming in on a brisk breeze for Northern Ireland. It is breezy, but it's pretty mild across the south, 11, 12 degrees. Further north, closer to average in single figures. We'll keep the showers coming in across Scotland this evening. Still some snow over the hills. Mostly rain at lower levels. The showers elsewhere easing off, so much of England and Wales having a dry night and a clear night, and a bit of a cold one as well. Enough breeze to stop towns and cities dropping to freezing, but certainly rural areas, some pockets of frost possible. We start off with more wet weather then across Scotland, and this weather front is going to be slower to head southwards, so quite a wet day over the Highlands, the rain turning increasingly to snow, but also pushing into the central belt and Northern Ireland, so a soggy afternoon here. For England and Wales, most places dry, just a few showers drifting into South Wales, the Midlands and southwest England. Sunny spells across the east, but it's going to get windy, particularly to the east of the Pennines, northeast England up to eastern Scotland. Very gusty conditions through Wednesday afternoon, and increasingly the winds picking up and bringing more snow showers through Wednesday night across western Scotland and Northern Ireland. So we're quite concerned about this area here, that cold front pushing south, introducing the cold air everywhere, but some snow and strong winds likely in the northwest as we go into Thursday. That's all your weather from me for now. Goodbye.
I'm Darren McCaffrey, and join me on The Briefing Monday to Thursday at 3 p.m. You'll get your afternoon fix of all the latest political stories, debate and analysis, as well as interviews with some of the biggest names in UK politics.
It's a problem that affects the whole world, Darren.
From Westminster to Cardiff, Edinburgh and Belfast, if it's happening in UK politics, we've got it covered. That's The Briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey, Monday to Thursday, 3 p.m. on GB News.